I never thought I'd end up in a situation like this. I'm 23, and I'd just gotten out of a 2-year relationship that ended pretty badly. To get back out there, I joined a couple of dating apps. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just someone to have fun with and maybe fill the gap my ex left behind. That's when I matched with Karen. Karen was bold. She was 43, confident, and didn't play games. She made it clear from the start that she wasn't interested in long dates or complicated emotions. She just wanted someone to have some no-strings-attached fun with. I wasn't complaining. She was absolutely stunning for her age, with curves in all the right places and this aura of experience that made her irresistible. We met up a few days after matching. It was a straightforward kind of night. She invited me over to her place, we had a drink, talked for a while, and then went straight to the bedroom. There was no hesitation or awkwardness. Karen was magnetic in a way I'd never experienced before, and I found myself wanting to see her again as soon as I left. True to her word, Karen wasn't clingy or emotional. She texted me a couple of days later with a simple, "Same time next week?" And that set the tone for our relationship. We saw each other once or twice a week for months, always at her house, always under the same unspoken agreement. No personal questions, no expectations, just sex. Karen did mention in passing that she had a son, but she didn't elaborate and I didn't ask. It wasn't any of my business. For all I knew, the kid was a teenager and stayed at his dad's house most of the time because I never saw or heard any sign of him. For a while, everything was perfect. Karen and I had settled into a comfortable routine. I'd get a text from her like, "You free tonight?" And I'd be at her place within the hour. No dinners, no movie nights, just raw, passionate connection. She had this unmatched confidence. She knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it. Karen's house became familiar territory. It was cozy but minimalistic, clearly a space built for one. I never questioned where her son was during our meetups. She once joked that he was old enough to handle himself and didn't need her hovering around. That was the extent of what I knew. At work, life was normal. I'd recently gotten a great job in marketing, and my coworkers were pretty chill. One of them, Ryan, was someone I got along with well. He was 21, a bit of a jokester, and always had some crazy story to share about his nights out. Ryan and I weren't best friends or anything, but we'd grab lunch together sometimes and trade war stories about dating apps. It was weird, though. A couple of times, when Karen and I were together, she'd make a comment about how young guys have so much energy. I'd laugh it off, not thinking much of it. She liked younger men. It's why we were doing this in the first place. But then came the first red flag. One night, while scrolling on my phone after leaving Karen's place, I stumbled across Ryan's Instagram. He'd posted a throwback photo for Mother's Day with a woman who looked familiar. At first I thought, nah, it can't be. But the resemblance was uncanny. The same wavy blonde hair, piercing eyes, and that confident smile. My stomach did a little flip, but I shook it off. What were the odds, right? A week later, everything came crashing down. Ryan invited a few of us from work over to his house for a casual get-together. He said his mom might be around but would probably stay out of our way. When I arrived, I was immediately hit with an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. The house looked familiar, the furniture, the layout, even the smell. My heart started racing, and I hoped, prayed, that I was wrong. And then she walked in. Karen. She froze when she saw me. I froze when I saw her. Ryan, completely oblivious, waved her over. "Guys, this is my mom," he said. Grinning like this was the proudest moment of his life. Karen looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. She gave a tight smile, muttered something about needing to grab a drink, and disappeared into the kitchen. I mumbled an excuse and followed her. In the kitchen, she spun around, her eyes wide. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed. "What am I doing here? What are you doing here? You didn't think to mention that your son is my coworker." I whispered back, my voice barely holding steady. She groaned, covering her face. "How was I supposed to know? You never talked about work." Ryan walked in just as things were getting heated. He looked between us, confused. "Do you two know each other?" I scrambled for an answer. Karen beat me to it. "Oh yeah, he helped me set up some tech stuff a while back." Small world. Huh. Ryan bought it, at least I think he did. but the look Karen gave me before leaving the room said it all. We were in deep, deep trouble. After that night, I couldn't get the image of Karen's face out of my head. Half panic, half desperation. I knew she'd try to contact me, and sure enough, I got a text later that evening. "We need to talk. Tomorrow at my place." When I showed up, she was pacing her living room. She looked more frazzled than I'd ever seen her. This was the woman who exuded control and composure, but now she seemed like a ticking time bomb. "Okay," she started, gesturing wildly with her hands. "We need to figure out what the hell we're going to do. Ryan cannot find out about this." "You think?" I shot back, still trying to wrap my head around everything. "Do you know how awkward it's been at work since that party? I can barely look him in the eye." Karen flopped onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "Look, I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't even know where you worked." I sat across from her, rubbing my temples. "This is insane. You're his mom, and he's not just some random coworker. I hang out with the guy. He tells me stuff about his life. Do you know how many times I've heard him brag about you being a cool mom?" She groaned. "I don't want to hear this right now." But I couldn't stop. And I'm the idiot who used to brag about this hot older woman I was sleeping with. What if he ever heard me? What if he puts it together? Karen leaned forward, her expression hardening. "He won't. We just have to act normal. You don't say a word. I don't say a word. And eventually, this will blow over." "Act normal?" I laughed bitterly. "You think I can just go to work and pretend everything's fine? I can barely keep it together as it is." Her voice softened. "Look, I know this is a mess, but we can get through it. We just have to be careful." The tension in the room was suffocating. I didn't have the energy to argue anymore, so I just nodded. "Fine, but if Ryan figures it out, I'm out of here." "Agreed," she said, though I could tell she wasn't convinced. As I left her house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to spiral out of control. And I was right. For the next couple of weeks, I did my best to avoid Ryan at work. I sat at a different table during lunch and made excuses to miss our usual group hangouts. Karen and I kept things strictly professional, no texts, no late-night meetups. I could feel the tension building, but I was determined to ride it out. Then came the close call. One Friday, Ryan invited me to grab drinks after work. I tried to make an excuse, but he wasn't having it. "Come on, man," he said, clapping me on the back. "You've been weird lately. What's up with you?" I froze. Was I that obvious? "Nothing," I mumbled. "Just busy." He wasn't buying it. "Busy doing what? You're single, no pets, no hobbies. What's eating you?" Before I could respond, Ryan leaned in, lowering his voice. "Wait, are you still seeing that hot older woman you used to talk about?" I nearly choked on my drink. "What?" "You know, the cougar," he said with a sly grin. "You were always bragging about her. What happened there?" I stammered something about how it fizzled out, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. "Damn," he said, shaking his head. "You must have really screwed it up. She sounds like a catch." I laughed nervously, desperate to change the subject. Luckily, Ryan got distracted by someone else in the group, and I used the opportunity to slip away. My heart was pounding. I dodged a bullet, but I knew it was only a matter of time before Ryan's curiosity got the better of him. The breaking point came a week later. Karen and I hadn't spoken since our last conversation, but I could tell she was struggling. She'd always been confident and unshakable, but Ryan mentioned that she'd been acting off at home. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text from Karen. "We need to talk. Tonight." I showed up at her house, dreading whatever she was about to say. She opened the door and immediately pulled me inside, her face pale. "Ryan knows," she blurted out. "What?" My stomach dropped. "How? Did you tell him?" "Of course not," she snapped. "But he's not stupid. He's been asking questions, connecting dots. He came home from work yesterday and asked me point blank if I knew you." "What did you say?" I told him the same story as before, that you helped me with some tech stuff a while back. But he didn't believe me. He kept pushing, saying I was being weird and secretive. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think. Okay, but he doesn't know for sure, right? Maybe we can still. Before I could finish, the front door slammed. Mom! Ryan's voice called from the hallway. Karen's eyes went wide. Shit! We both froze as Ryan walked into the living room and stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me. What the hell is going on? He demanded, looking between us. My brain short-circuited. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Karen tried to step in. Ryan, it's not what you think. Oh, cut the crap, Mom, he snapped. I'm not an idiot. I've heard him talking about you at work. I've seen the way you both act. Just tell me the truth. The room went silent. Karen looked at me, then back at Ryan. Finally, she sighed. Fine. Yes, we've been seeing each other. But we didn't know you worked together until it was too late. Ryan's face turned red, and for a second, I thought he was going to hit me. Instead, he just shook his head and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Karen sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Well, she said bitterly, that went well. I didn't respond. I was too busy wondering how the hell I was going to face Ryan at work on Monday. Monday came faster than I wanted it to. I walked into the office with a knot in my stomach, half expecting Ryan to punch me the second he saw me. To my surprise, he acted completely normal, or at least he tried to. He avoided me all morning, but during lunch, he made a passive-aggressive comment loud enough for everyone to hear. Crazy how small the world is, huh? People turn up in the most unexpected places. A couple of coworkers laughed, not understanding the weight behind his words, but I felt like my stomach had dropped through the floor. That afternoon, Ryan finally cornered me in the break room. You're a real piece of work, you know that? He said, slamming the door shut behind him. Ryan, I swear I didn't know she was your mom, I said quickly. If I'd known. But you didn't stop once you did know, did you? He interrupted, his voice low but furious. You just kept sneaking around like some coward. He wasn't wrong, and I didn't have a defense. I messed up, I admitted. I get it if you don't want to talk to me anymore. But please don't let this blow up at work. Ryan let out a bitter laugh. Oh, don't worry. I'm not going to make a scene. But don't expect me to act like everything's fine either. For the rest of the day, the tension was unbearable. Every time I saw Ryan, he gave me a look that made me want to crawl under my desk. I knew this wasn't sustainable, but I didn't know how to fix it. That night, Karen called me. She sounded exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Ryan won't talk to me, she said. He's been locked in his room since he got home from work. I don't know what to do. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. Maybe he just needs time, I offered weakly. Karen sighed. Time isn't going to fix this. He feels betrayed by both of us. There was a long pause before she continued. I think we need to stop seeing each other. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. What? Karen, come on. We can figure this out. She cut me off. No, we can't. Ryan is my son, and I've already hurt him enough. I can't keep doing this. I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew she was right. Our situation was a mess, and the longer it went on, the worse it would get. Okay, I said quietly, if that's what you want. It's not what I want, she replied, her voice breaking. But it's what I need to do. The call ended, and I sat there in silence, feeling a mix of regret, sadness, and relief. Karen was out of my life, but the damage was already done. I still had to face Ryan at work, and I knew things would never go back to normal. The next few weeks at work were pure hell. Ryan didn't say a word to me unless it was strictly work-related, and even then, his tone was clipped and hostile. Everyone else in the office started noticing the tension between us, and rumors began to spread. Did you and Ryan get into a fight or something? One coworker asked me during lunch. Nah, just some personal stuff, I said, trying to sound casual. We're good, but we weren't good. Not even close. Every time I saw him, I was reminded of how badly I'd screwed up. I thought about quitting more times than I could count. But I needed the job. Plus, a part of me felt like running away would only make things worse. Then, one Friday afternoon, Ryan finally broke his silence. Hey, he said, catching me in the parking lot after work. His tone wasn't angry, it was exhausted. Hey, I replied cautiously. He shoved his hands in his pockets and sighed. Look, I'm still pissed, but I get it. You didn't know who she was at first, and by the time you figured it out, things were already messy. I was so shocked I didn't know what to say. Thanks, I finally managed. I never wanted to hurt you, man. I swear. Ryan nodded. Yeah, well, you did. But I'm not gonna let it ruin my life, or yours. It wasn't a forgiveness speech, but it was something. Despite our uneasy truce, I couldn't shake the feeling that my time at the company was up. Every day felt like walking on eggshells, and I knew I couldn't keep working alongside Ryan without things eventually boiling over again. A week later, I handed in my resignation. My manager was surprised but supportive, and I kept my explanation vague, just looking for a fresh start. When Ryan found out, he didn't say much. He just nodded and muttered, probably for the best. On my last day, Karen texted me for the first time since we'd ended things. He told me you're leaving. Thank you. I think it's what we all need. I didn't reply. There wasn't anything left to say. As I walked out of the office for the final time, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, regret. It all hit me at once. I'd lost my job, my relationship with Karen, and whatever friendship I'd had with Ryan. But I'd also learned a hard lesson about boundaries, decisions, and consequences. Life moves on, and so did I. A few months later, I found a new job in a different city, far away from Karen, Ryan, and the mess I'd left behind. Still, every now and then, I think about what happened and wonder if they ever patched things up. I hope they did, because if I learned anything from this, it's that some relationships are worth saving, even if it means letting go of others. The first few weeks at my new job were a mix of relief and unease. I had a clean slate, but the memories of what happened still lingered. Karen and Ryan stayed in my head like ghosts. Every time I walked into the office, I half expected someone to recognize me, to point and say, "You're the guy who," but no one did. My coworkers were friendly but professional, and the work environment was much more laid back. It was what I needed, space to rebuild. I threw myself into my new role, working late most nights to keep my mind occupied. Outside of work, I started going to the gym and taking up hobbies I'd neglected during the chaos. Slowly, life began to feel normal again. Then one day I got a message from Ryan. "Hey, just wanted to say I'm glad you're doing okay. Things are getting better between me and my mom. Thanks for leaving when you did. It helped." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Glad to hear that. Take care of yourself, man." It was short, but it felt like closure. A small final chapter to a messy story. Months turned into a year, and the whole ordeal started to feel like a distant memory. I didn't tell anyone at my new job about what happened, and I didn't bring it up in conversations with friends. It was a chapter of my life I wanted to leave behind. But every so often, I'd catch myself thinking about Karen. I wondered if she ever regretted how things had played out, if she missed the simplicity of our time together before everything went south. And Ryan, I hoped he and Karen had truly repaired their relationship. Despite everything, it was clear how much she cared about him. That's why she ended things with me, after all. One night, after a long day at work, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. There weren't any of Karen, of course, we'd been careful about that, but the memories came flooding back anyway. As complicated as it was, part of me missed her. She was confident, sexy, and unapologetic, and for a while, being with her made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. But the cost of that thrill was too high. In the end, I came to terms with the fact that it wasn't meant to last. Karen was a chapter in my story, not the whole book. And with that realization, I was finally able to let go. It had been nearly 2 years since the fiasco with Karen and Ryan. Life had settled into a predictable rhythm, and I liked it that way. I was excelling at my job, making new friends, and even dating here and there, though nothing serious. Then, one Saturday, while grabbing groceries, I saw her, Karen. She was in the produce aisle, holding a bag of apples and inspecting them like nothing had changed. My heart stopped. She looked just as stunning as I remembered. Confident, poised, and completely unaware of my presence. For a moment, I considered turning around and walking away. But then, as if sensing me, she glanced up and locked eyes with me. "Wow," she said, her voice soft but filled with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah," I replied, my voice shaking slightly. Small world, huh? We stood there awkwardly for a moment before she broke the silence. How have you been? Good, I said quickly. Work's good. Life's good. She nodded, her expression unreadable. Ryan's doing well, she said after a pause. He's seeing someone now. A nice girl. I think she's good for him. That's great, I said, genuinely relieved. I'm glad things are better. Karen hesitated, then smiled faintly. Me too. We exchanged a few more pleasantries before parting ways. I left the store feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and closure. Seeing Karen again reminded me of the intensity of that chapter in my life, but also how far I'd come since then. After running into Karen, I found myself reflecting on the person I'd become. The mistakes I'd made with her had shaped me in ways I hadn't fully appreciated until now. I was more careful, more aware of how my actions affected others. I also realized I was ready to move on. For real this time. A few weeks later, I met someone new. Her name was Emily, and she was everything Karen wasn't. Open, grounded, and uncomplicated. We hit it off immediately, bonding over a shared love of hiking and bad action movies. With Emily, there were no secrets or hidden agendas. It was refreshing. One night, as we sat on her couch watching an old Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, she turned to me and said, "You seem like someone who's been through a lot." I laughed, thinking about Karen and Ryan and everything that had happened. "You could say that," I replied. "Well," she said, taking my hand, "whatever it was, I'm glad it brought you here." In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Karen and Ryan would always be a part of my story, but they no longer defined it. I'd finally closed the book on that chapter and started a new one. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where the story would go next. As the months with Emily turned into a year, life felt steady, peaceful, even. I hadn't heard from Karen or Ryan since that brief run-in at the grocery store, and for once, the past felt like it belonged firmly in the past. Every so often, I'd think back to those chaotic days, the tension at work, the late-night rendezvous with Karen, the look on Ryan's face when he found out. It was the kind of story you'd laugh about if it hadn't been your life. But the truth was, it taught me a lot. I learned about boundaries and how fragile trust can be. I learned how one decision can ripple through other people's lives in ways you don't anticipate. Most importantly, I learned the value of moving forward, even when it feels impossible. One evening, Emily and I were sitting on the back porch, sipping wine as the sun set. She turned to me, her eyes curious. "Do you ever feel like your life could have gone a completely different direction?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I think about that a lot. But I also think everything happens for a reason, even the mistakes." Emily smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "I like that. It's a good way to look at it." As the sky turned from orange to deep blue, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. The chaos, the heartbreak, the awkward encounters, they'd all led me here, to this quiet moment of contentment. Karen and Ryan were just a part of my journey, a wild detour on the road to something better. And for that, I couldn't bring myself to regret it, because in the end, all roads lead somewhere. And I was finally on the right one.